Thank you so much. And for those who I haven't met before, I'm Naomi Green. I'm Managing Director of England's Economic Heartland, which is the subnational transport body for the area covering the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor. We have a really important role to play working with local authorities across the region to plan integrated transport in this very important part of the UK economy. Part of the work that we've done is recognising that in a geography like Oxford to Cambridge, there is a huge amount of work to do to respond to the economic opportunity that we have. And so today, as part of the Interchange Conference, I'm delighted to launch our integration task force. You'll hear a little bit more about it. For me, I describe it as a little bit like the transport celebrities, and I just said to Danny, as a Take That fan in my youth, this is like Take That fans feel for transport people. So there we go. Just a little bit of context about the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor, and then the main thing I'd like you to be able to do is hear from Danny and Stephen about our aspirations for the region. So why integration? The region between Oxford and Cambridge covers a huge amount of geography, and one of the biggest issues we have is that our economic clusters don't start and finish within what you might call city regions. They spread across a much bigger geography, from Oxford to Cambridge, but not alone, covering Silverstone with things like high performance technology that goes all the way across the geography. We have, of course, got the life sciences, but also digital creative sector down towards the further south of the region with Pinewood Studios, Warner Brothers, all of those studios coming out of the Buckinghamshire and Hertfordshire area. It's a huge area of economic opportunity. But we also know that with the introduction of East-West Rail coming, actually by putting really good first last mile services into the region, you can nigh on double the number of people that can make the most of that piece of infrastructure. That is an unbelievable statistics given the way that funding is decided in this country for local transport, where it's very different from road and rail that have longer term funding solutions. Actually, in a region like ours, the role of local transport is not just to make local communities have better connection, it's actually to double the number of people that can contribute towards the economy of this region by accessing East-West Rail. But we've got some challenges. We've got up to 4 new towns potentially coming, 3 in the region, and in North London, 1 that connects straight onto the Hertfordshire border, causing potential real transport challenges for us. We have the unbelievable opportunity that is Universal Theme Park coming to just south of Bedford. 8 million visitors a year. That's 8 million people travelling to a part of Bedfordshire that has not had those visitors before. And it's a huge challenge and an opportunity for us. Not only that, we also have a planning application in for Puy de Fou, which is a French theme park that bought a site just outside Bicester, another 1 million visitors a year. And then of course we've got things like Silverstone and Bicester Village, all tourism assets that bring together a huge amount of additional travel demand. And then we have finally the growth commissions in Oxford and Cambridge. In Cambridge alone, an expectation for 150,000 new houses. All of these things are challenges that will bring both economic opportunity, lots of new people to the region, but actually we're a region that has a very congested transport system already, particularly on our roads, and not an unlimited pot able to unlock that for us. So what have we done about it? Integration provides the framework for everything that EEH is trying to do for the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor. We're launching, as today, the Integration Task Force, and the fantastic members of the panel are here sitting on stools over there, but also on the stage with Danny Williams and Stephen Joseph. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the moment. The task force focuses on 3 core integration themes: connectivity, growth and infrastructure, and you can see the basis of those on the screen. But also, actually the deeper conversation is how we work to enable those particular themes to be unlocked better. Is it through local solutions? More so, systems alignment. How do we work with homeschool transport, the education system, NHS, to actually think about the transport system in the round? Where are there policy issues that are creating barriers for us? Where can data help us, either through behavioural science or different techniques? Where are there technical solutions, technical knowledge that we're just not making the most of? Where is the only answer in innovation? Where is it that we can use innovation to really create something different in this special region. And then finally, funding and finance. Well, actually, in a region like ours, we quite often get told by the government, yes, of course you can do that. You've got to find third-party funding to do it. It's not an easy thing to do. So what is the solution that we need to do to look at how we might fund and finance these better? They're all the sort of challenges that by creating an integration task force chaired by Stephen Joseph, a professor of the University of Hertfordshire, but also very well experienced in this region, in this area of work, is going to help us to unlock. So I'm delighted today to be announcing the task force, and I'm also delighted to bring Danny Williams, Director of the Integrated National Transport Strategy, to the stage to hear from him as well. So, enough from me. I think it's more important to hear from our colleagues on the stage. Danny, I'm going to hand over to you for some reflections, if you can, on the national approach to integration, what you've learned through the process of shaping the Integrated National Transport Strategy, and what we can do in the Oxford to Cambridge region to do this better, but also how we can then translate that learning to colleagues and partners across the country. Cool. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Naomi. Hopefully you can hear me. Before I do that, I'm just going to talk to the question that pretty much everyone's asked me since I've got here, which is when is this strategy coming out? I think I can say hopefully quite soon, but I can't be more specific. So, yeah, I'm fairly confident very soon. The way that we went about building this strategy was highly collaborative, actually. So we worked, as many people in this room will know, we went all around the country to try and talk to people. We've done very deep research into harder to reach user groups. So we've reached out to people who are older or less physically able and so on, in order to try and get a really rounded understanding of what people are looking for. And we boiled it down, I think, to three kind of principal themes. So one is around how do you make particularly public transport competitive for people with non-public transport. We've talked about partnership, so how local government and central government should be working together and with other stakeholders, which is super relevant here. And then finally, we're talking a lot around place and the role of place. So this is super aligned with what you need to do, Naomi. Within that, there are some very well-rehearsed themes around essentially how do you make it easier for people to switch to reliable public transport services. So this is about, there's a lot in there around accessibility, there's a lot around ticketing and simplifying pricing models. There's also a lot around making who's accountable for what and making accountable decisions at a regional basis. For this particular region, it's going to be really tricky because you have all sorts of local authorities, you've got parts competing in different ways, and I hope that this task force will put a lot of grit into the system. We're going to need to be quite difficult and create problems in a nice way for our local government partners. So that's my opening shot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. I've just written down put grit into the system with a little bit of a panic that that's quite something to address, but excitement that we can do it. And I think one of the great things about the task force is the experience and knowledge in the room to not just put grit into the system, but actually navigate with us the solutions to address that grit so that we can genuinely create something special here. I'm going to hand over now to Professor Stephen Joseph. Many of you will know him well. Stephen, thank you for agreeing to chair the Integration Task Force. What are your ambitions for the task force, and what are the secret missing ingredients that you're looking to see as a result of our work together?
Well, thanks, Naomi, and just to say, firstly, thank you for asking me to chair this. It's an exciting, possibly daunting proposition, which I'm likening to, we will have succeeded if it doesn't become a successor to the Yes Minister episode about an integrated transport strategy, which was titled A Bed of Nails. So we want to make this not a bed of nails. We want to make this easy and the right thing to do for everybody involved. But to do that, I think there are three things that the task force will have to do. Firstly, I think it's about challenging and those involved across the corridor in government, in local government, and among developers and others, so that we can suggest to them ways in which business as usual won't necessarily be the right thing, won't actually produce the right outcomes, but to support EEH and others where they want to do the right thing on big issues like the Universal Studios development and so on. So there's a challenging and supporting role for the task force. Secondly, I think it's about applying best practice. And as you said, Naomi, the people on this task force have enormous amounts of knowledge about what good looks like, not just in the UK, but around the world. And I think a challenge for us is to apply that, to help you and others and partners apply that good practice to this corridor, so that we can create an integrated transport network based on what we know works. So I think there's a best practice angle to this. And thirdly, I think there's a specific challenge which you've already referred to around the new towns along the corridor. 4, possibly 5 new towns around the wider corridor. And I think it's clear that if we just build those on a standard model of low density car dependency, that won't work economically, and it won't even work for placemaking. So I think we've got to find ways in which we can make high quality new town and other major housing development actually work for people in transport and other terms. And that means good local services and facilities built in from day one, high quality public transport within and to those new towns, and really good active travel networks. And I've recently had the pleasure of going on a study tour to Freiburg. I can see 1 or 2 people here who join me on that, to see what good looks like there. But we've also seen good practice in places like Cambridge. My sense is that to get there, they had to really push boulders uphill to do it. And we've got to make it easier for good to happen along the corridor. So I hope that summarises what the task force will do.
Really fascinating. Thank you very much. And I think, Danny, at the beginning of your remarks, you mentioned the collaborative approach that you'd been through in developing the Integrated National Transport Strategy, due out shortly. And as part of that, was there anything that you sort of captured along the way that inspired you, that might feel hard to do, but that you would love to see?
Yeah, accessibility actually. So the fact that too often accessibility is sort of as an additional thing in the system, whereas actually if you get it right, getting accessibility right opens doors for literally everybody, and flipping our thinking around was really integral. So that could come down to the level of what angle is the chair or the seat on a bus stop, right? If it's at that kind of angle, then an older person may not be able to sit on it, therefore doesn't use the bus, and it all sort of follows from there. So getting accessibility right for everybody, not just for a group of people, was the real trigger.
That's really interesting. And Stephen, I'm actually going to ask you the same question. In your thinking and your expertise through the work you're doing at the moment, looking at other places, but also through the work of the University of Hertfordshire over a longer period of time, is there similarly anything that you would love to see, but that feels really difficult?
Well, I mentioned already the difficulty of producing really high quality new housing development and the need to make that work. And having seen, I think it is possible. If you look at places like Eddington and Waterbeach, there are some examples around which are looking good, and also plenty of places that are less good here. So we need to make sure that we emulate the best in that area. But I think some of this is simply about making the most of what we've got. And I was struck, many people here will have seen Thomas Abelman's Mini Switzerland report, because I don't think if you're on LinkedIn or any social media you will have missed this. But the really notable thing about the Hope Valley in the Peak District was there are 5 bus companies there, none of them serve the railway stations. And actually it's not difficult to make better use of what we've got. to give a much better experience in practice for people living along the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. So I think that some of it's about just making best use of what we've got, and some of that might actually help solve some of the issues that government's facing. For example, if you have better bus services with guaranteed networks through franchising, you might actually be able to divert some of the enormous amounts of money that's going to special educational needs transport into those networks. So joining up transport with other budgets, other areas of government, I think will be really useful and important, and is something that the task force might be able to help happen.
And interestingly enough, of course, in that particular example, accessibility would be at the forefront of those conversations anyway, because of the nature of that challenge and opportunity.
Yeah. I was going to add to that, though, just backing that point up. As part of the work we did for the research into the strategy, we went to France and looked at, in particular, a city in France called Dijon. And what really struck me there was a kind of less is more strategy. They actually reduced the number of bus routes, and they reduced the number of car parking in the centre of the city, but they increased the amount of car parking overall, and they actually massively increased bus usage by really focusing on where are we going to be able to produce a really reliable service, where are we going to make sure that we get passenger numbers, and kind of by doing a less is more, they've kind of kick-started the system, and it's now growing. They're now able to grow bus routes again, but they've massively increased ridership.
Gosh, that is interesting, isn't it? And how you capture the lessons learned from that and make it acceptable to the Treasury is quite an interesting challenge that we probably all would love to work through, and I'm sure our task force will be keen to do that with us. I'm mindful we've got about 5 minutes left. I'd like to leave a couple of minutes just to hear from task force members about those kind of key things that they would like to see coming out of it. But before we do, are there any questions from the floor? I think we've got a microphone. If anyone wants to ask a question of Danny and Stephen.
The Chancellor has made a statement today in which she's downgraded the growth strategy or growth expectations. We're living in a climate where local authorities are going to be constrained on what they can afford. Are there any innovative ways of financing that the task force is going to be considering?
Thank you. That's a really great question, and one that we're very much looking forward to the task force answering. But before they do, any reflections from Stephen and Danny on the question? It is a core challenge that we are grappling with in a region that doesn't have integrated settlements coming forward in the next few years. So your reflections on that particular, it's a really tricky one. Either Danny or Stephen.
Not much I can say.
I'll have a go. I think one key area to explore, particularly in this corridor, is land value capture. We've seen it working in practice, how that's worked in terms of bringing some of the finance to the new stations on the Northumberland line, in which and land value capture worked by capturing the value to landowners, not developers. And that's worked there, and I know some of the people involved are busy talking to other authorities about how that might work elsewhere, including in this corridor. And given the amount of development that's proposed, I think there are big opportunities for using land value capture to finance some of the things we're talking about here. It's been long observed that, for things like the Jubilee Line extension, which led to large-scale increases in land value, even in central London, which weren't captured at all to help the financing of that. And I think, although Elizabeth Line did get some of that through a business rate supplement, there are opportunities for learning from what's happened elsewhere in terms of thinking about land value capture and mechanisms for doing that. And other mechanisms, I know Oxford has been toying with a workplace parking levy, for instance. Nottingham has used that to finance good public transport in its city. So I think there's things like that that we need to explore and make the case for through the task force.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Danny, if any reflections on that? And then I'm going to come over to the task force members if any further comments from them.
No, I have no public reflections on
Danny
that.
has no comment, which is excellent because the task force are about to comment as well. Thank you. So if I hand over, if you can introduce yourself first, so colleagues know who you are, and then any reflections. I think we're going to Thomas first, and then Erica, I think, next. If you want more information about the task force members that here and others that are joining, we will put a press release out with information about the task force in the coming days. But it's really fantastic to have some of our members here, and I'm going to hand over to Thomas to introduce himself and any reflections.
Yeah, Thomas Abelman. I'm all over LinkedIn. Just picking up the question that we were just asked, because this is fundamentally all about money. On my podcast last week, I spoke to Helmut Eichhorn, who's in charge of integrated transport for Switzerland. And I said, what's the first thing a country should do if it's trying to deliver an integrated transport model like Switzerland? And he said, the first thing you must do, I quote precisely, is persuade your people and your politicians that it is the way to become a very wealthy country. And we are kind of, the Chancellor's forecasts have been downgraded again. We're stuck in this doom loop in which we don't invest because we can't convince ourselves we can afford to invest. Therefore, we keep further reducing our economic output, despite the fact that we have in London proof that when you have an integrated transport network, which we've had now since 1933, you can generate a high productivity economy. And in the rest of the country where we haven't. London is pretty much equivalent to its benchmark in terms of productivity per head compared to equivalent cities elsewhere, whereas everywhere else in the United Kingdom is dramatically below equivalent cities in the rest of Europe. The richest place in London, in the UK, outside London, the richest county outside London is poorer than the poorest canton of Switzerland, where they have an integrated transport model. And if you look at France, they have an ongoing pipeline of development in integrated transport projects and infrastructure, not just in Paris, but in every city. They have built a number of tramways that pretty much means every city of more than 150,000 people now has one. They're now building a crossrail equivalent for every major regional city in France. And it feels like the number one task of this task force is to address, you mentioned the Yes Minister episode, it's been 40 years, we know all the problems and we know all the solutions. The fundamental problem comes down to the fact, why do we not have this already? An integrated bus route is less efficient than a non-integrated bus route. An integrated rail route is less efficient. If you look at each one individually, the accountant will tell you it is inefficient. The timetable is less efficient and the fare structure is less efficient. If you integrate them, the customer's journey becomes efficient at the expense of the efficiency of each individual transport mode. 40 years we haven't solved that, and somehow it's our job to try and solve it, or we will never make progress.
Thank you very much, Thomas. If I can hand over to Erica, and then David.
Erica Lewis, I'm the CEO of Connected Places Catapult. I was attracted, but I wasn't told that it was going to be navigating grit. I thought we were going to be the grit in the oyster. I'm hoping that's what we're going to be. For me, innovation needs to run through this programme like words through a stick of rock. And the kinds of things that I want us to be doing in terms of the challenges, saying to all of the people who are working in this area and the money that they're spending, what is the challenge that you want to achieve, what is the outcome that you want to achieve, rather than what is the product that you've bought many, many times before that you're going to buy again. And if we can manage to do that, then I think we'll make a massive change to what we learn and how we create all of this activity in this great area.
Thanks very much. David Milner, MD of Crate Street. So we're an urban design firm, so it's very kind of unusual that we're here on transport, but actually I think that's the whole point, is that we're talking here about place and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of new homes. For me, Tom, you've said money, I'm going to say trust. So for me it's about give some of these regions money, let them raise money and then trust them to spend it. Let's stop trying to micromanage every single little bit, every single little decision, project, etc. Let mayors build, and then hopefully we'll get things done a little bit quicker.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Any other reflections, Rachel, Nicola?
Are we out of time? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, we're good on time.
Super briefly, I guess my add, in terms of what I'm most excited about from what I've just listened to all of you talk about here, is it's almost about the opportunity to get this just so much more right, but also in the context of all the other change that we know is going on out there in terms of the local government landscape and all the pieces to do with devolution, etc., etc. What if we could get this much more right as well as navigating all that? It feels like this sort of a group might actually be able to make a really significant difference in holding stuff together at a time when it otherwise might break apart. I think that's interesting. My only other very brief thought is that in terms of, you're talking about sort of, you know, things that we might dig into, it feels like we're going to have to get across the top of the whole lot and then figure out where to dive first. But maybe let's not decide where to dive in its entirety until we've actually got a bit further into it. So maybe do a couple of things and then take stock, rather than presuming we know where we're going from the beginning, because I suspect we don't.
Fantastic. I think there's a work plan coming out of the team as well, which I'm very excited by. And last but certainly no mean least, Nicola.
Thanks, Naomi. Nicola Kane, Chair of the Transport Planning Society. Slightly being put on the spot here, but but I came into transport from an urban planning master's, and integrating land use and transport has been the dream my whole career. I think we've seen lots of examples where it hasn't happened, so this feels like a fantastic opportunity to actually see that truly happening in practice, not just at a strategic level but at a local level, the level that really kind of impacts people's day-to-day lives. So I'm not quite sure exactly what we're going to be doing as a group, but I'm super excited to get stuck in, and yeah, it's fantastic to have this panel put together, so thank you, Naomi, for bringing the band together.
Thank you so much to all of our panel members. If you want to find out more about the task force, our email address is up on the screen for now. Just drop us an email and we can give you some more information about it. Before I say thanks to Stephen and Danny, I'm just going to, a quick quote from Lord Patrick Vallance, who is the ministerial champion for the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor. He said just last week to leaders from across the region that countries would fall over themselves to get hold of a region as significant as the Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor. It is an extraordinary opportunity for the UK that should benefit everyone across the corridor. So here, with my incredible task force panel members, I very much look forward to rising to the challenge. Thank you so much to Danny, Stephen, the task force, and everyone.